Old money does not buy land because land goes up. That is the story everyone repeats, and it is the wrong one. The families whose fortunes outlived empires bought ground for the opposite reason. They bought it for what it makes impossible. Here is the machinery underneath and how it was built. Because the real threat to a great fortune was never the market. A fortune is rarely destroyed by a war or a crash. It is destroyed by one person on one ordinary afternoon signing one piece of paper, one grandson with debts, one widow with a better offer, one heir who simply wants his share in cash and is perfectly entitled to it. So the families who intended to last did something that sounds absurd if you think of land as an investment. They made their own land impossible to sell. Not difficult, not unwise. Impossible as a matter of law, enforced by courts for centuries. And once you see that, the picture inverts. The estate is not the trophy of the fortune. The estate is the lock on it. By the end of this, you will know how that lock was built, how a whole industry grew up to break it, and what quietly replaced it, including the version running right now in countries where the old words were struck out of the law long ago. Start with the obvious answer, because the obvious answer is not wrong. It is just far too small to explain what actually happened. Land appreciates. Over a long enough horizon, good ground in a settled country tends to be worth more later than it was worth earlier. Everyone knows this. Every family that ever bought a field knows this. And if appreciation were the whole explanation, then the families who lasted would simply be the families who bought early and held on, and the story would end there. But that explanation collapses the moment you look at what those same families could have bought instead. Shares in trading companies, government debt, ships, mines, banks, whole industries that outperformed farmland for generations at a stretch. Plenty of fortunes went into those things, and plenty of those fortunes are gone. So the question is not why land goes up. The question is why land, specifically, kept turning up under the families that survived, and kept being absent from the families that did not. The answer is a word that has almost disappeared from ordinary speech: alienate. To a thing, in law, is to pass it out of your hands, to sell it, to give it, to mortgage it, to leave it to whoever you like in a will. It is not a moral word. It has nothing to do with betrayal or neglect. It simply describes the power to make a thing stop being yours. And power is the single most dangerous thing a family can hand to an individual. Because every asset a family has ever lost, it lost through somebody exercising exactly that power, not through the asset failing, through a human being holding the pen, deciding. Locked land is the only major asset where the law itself was willing to take that power away. You cannot make a share certificate unsellable in any serious way. You cannot make gold unsellable. You cannot stop a man spending money he legally holds. But land sits in one fixed place. It is registered, it is visible, and it is bound to a title that a court can define however the law says a title may be defined. Land is the asset that can be legally welded shut. And there is a second property of land that matters just as much. It cannot be hidden, and it cannot be moved. A family can quietly lose a portfolio, and nobody outside the household ever needs to know. A family cannot quietly lose a valley. The neighbors know. The tenants know. Land carries its own audit, permanently, in public. Quick ask before we go further. If this is the kind of thing you want to understand properly, subscribe now. It genuinely helps, and there is a great deal more of this system to show you. The welding began earlier than most people assume. In the year 1285, an English parliament passed a statute that historians now call the Statute of Westminster II. Inside it sat a provision with a Latin name, De Donis Conditionalibus, concerning conditional gifts. This deserves a moment. A gift with a condition attached is not really a gift in the way we use the word. It is a transfer that arrives carrying instructions, and the instructions outrank the person receiving it. That provision created and fixed the form of an estate in land that the English would call the fee-tail, and that ordinary people would come to call the entail. Understand what such a law actually is. It is not advice, it is not a tax incentive, it is not a nudge. It is a state agreeing in writing to enforce a private family's decision against that family's own future members. A man could now hand his descendants a thing they would be obliged to keep. The stated purpose was not financial at all. The point, as it was understood at the time, was for a patriarch to perpetuate his bloodline, his family name, his honor, and his coat of arms in the persons of a series of capable and independent male descendants. The wealth was the vehicle, the name was the cargo. Which explains something that confuses modern readers of these documents. They are obsessed with names, with arms, with lines of descent, and they read as pure vanity. They are not vanity, they are the specification. The land was the mechanism chosen to carry a name forward, and the paperwork is precise about the cargo because the cargo was the point. And the legal effect of that ambition was blunt. Under an entail, property was prevented from being sold, from being wasted, from being divided by will, or otherwise alienated by whoever happened to be holding it. Instead, it passed automatically and entirely by operation of law to an heir. Read that again slowly, because every word of it is doing work. Automatically, entirely, by operation of law, not by agreement, not by the goodwill of whoever held it. The holder's opinion was removed from the process. Now, sit inside that arrangement for a moment, because it is much stranger than it sounds from the outside. You are the head of the family. The house is yours. The land is yours. Everyone in the county addresses you as the owner, and in every practical sense of the word, you are. You collect the rents, you decide what is planted, you choose which cottages get rebuilt and which tenants stay. And you cannot sell 1 acre of it. Not to save the family, not to seize an opportunity, not because you have found something better. The ground beneath your feet is going to your heir whether you approve of him or not, whether he deserves it or not, whether he is competent or not. This the part that modern ears refuse to accept at first hearing. We are trained to think of ownership as a bundle of freedoms, and to assume that the richer you are, the more of those freedoms you hold. The entail says the opposite. It says that at a certain level of ambition, ownership stops being about what you may do and starts being about what nobody may do. And the cost of that was enormous. This is the part that flattering versions of the story leave out. An entail did not just stop sales, it strangled credit. Think about it from the lender's side of the table. A man comes to you wanting to borrow against a great estate. The estate is real, the rents are real, the house has stood for 2 centuries. But at the moment that man dies, his personal estate ceases to have any right to the property, or to the income the property generates. It all moves on, instantly, to the next holder in the line, who never signed anything, who owes you nothing, and who did not ask for your money. So what exactly are you lending against? A stream of income that evaporates on a date nobody can predict. And the date is not merely unknown, it is unknowable in principle, because it is the date of one man's death, and no schedule of repayments can be built around that. A lender can model a harvest. A lender can model a market. A lender cannot model a heart. Lending on those terms was extremely risky, and it was priced accordingly when it was available at all. Which means the family with the most secure landholding in the district could easily be the family least able to raise cash against it. Hold that contradiction, because it is the hidden price of every lock in this story. The tighter you weld an asset shut, the less that asset can do for you in a crisis. Security and flexibility are not 2 features you buy together. They are 2 ends of one lever, and every family that has lasted made a deliberate, permanent, painful choice about where on that lever to sit. Most people, when they imagine great inherited wealth, imagine maximum optionality. Money everywhere, doors open in every direction, nothing that cannot be converted into something else by lunchtime. That is not what generational wealth looks like from the inside. From the inside, it looks like a very large asset you are responsible for, that you cannot touch, that will cost you money every year of your life, and that you will hand to someone else. And the annual cost is not a small detail. A great house does not sit quietly. Roofs fail, walls move. Land that is farmed needs investment long before it returns anything, and land that is not farmed still has to be defended against weather and time. The holder pays all of it out of income, and he is not permitted to top that income up by selling the corner of the asset that is generating the bills. There is a specific kind of pressure in that, and it is not the pressure most people imagine wealth to be. It is not the fear of losing money. It is the experience of being responsible for something much larger than you, on a budget you cannot expand, with no exit available in any direction. And here is the piece that changes how you should read every stately home you have ever visited. The families who accepted that deal are, disproportionately, the families still there. Not because they were wiser than everyone else, not because they picked better assets, because the deal removed the one decision that kills fortunes, and it removed it permanently, from people who had not been born yet, and therefore could not argue. A rule that only binds you is a preference. A rule that binds your grandchildren before they exist is a structure. That distinction is the whole subject of this video, and everything that follows is a variation on it. Different centuries, different countries, different vocabulary, entirely different legal machinery, and underneath all of it, the same single move, performed over and over. Take the power to sell away from the individual and give it to nobody. The entail was the crude version. It kept the land whole and it named the heir, and for a certain kind of family, that was enough. The great English estates ran on something more refined and more revealing, called the strict settlement. And the strict settlement did something that almost nobody outside of property law has ever properly understood. It divided ownership across time. Hear how it worked. A landowner would provide in his will that the land pass to his eldest son, not as an outright owner, but as what the law called a tenant for life. And the same document would provide that after that son, the land go to that son's eldest son, as tenant in tail. So the man in the great house is a tenant for life. He is not a landlord in the ordinary sense, and he is not an owner in the ordinary sense. He has been given the use of something for the length of his life, and the next holder is already named in a document signed before that next holder existed. We say things like this loosely in normal conversation. He could not sell it. Usually what we mean is that he would not have dared, or that it would have been a scandal, or that his relatives would have made his life unbearable. That is not what this means, and the precise description of the arrangement deserves to be heard in full, because it does something far cleverer than forbidding a sale. The land was effectively inalienable by the tenant in possession, but had to pass to the tenant in tail, and the fruits and income of that land were under the control of the tenant in possession and could not be claimed by the tenant in tail. Read that twice because it is the entire design in one sentence. The man living in the house takes the income and cannot touch the asset. The heir owns the asset and cannot touch the income. Two people, one estate, and neither of them holds both halves. That is not a restriction imposed on the family from outside. It is a restriction the family placed on itself by splitting the two things a sale requires across two people who can never be the same person at the same moment. A buyer could arrive with the money in a bag, and there would be nobody in the room able to accept it alone. Sit with how total that is. The most powerful man in the district was, in one specific respect, less capable than a tenant farmer. The farmer could sell his cart. The great man could not sell his hill. And that inversion is not an accident of drafting. It is the design working exactly as intended. The family had identified the single most dangerous person in its own future, and the single most dangerous person in its own future was always going to be whoever happened to be in charge at the time. Not a rival house, not the crown, not a bad harvest. The man in the chair, in a difficult year, with an obvious solution sitting in front of him. So they removed his ability to act on it before they had any idea who he would be. But the strict settlement had one more feature, and it is the feature that made it a machine rather than a document. A settlement drawn up once would eventually run out. Sooner or later, a holder arrives who is not bound, and the whole structure dissolves. So the families built in a renewal. It was called resettlement. As each tenant in tail came of age, he would be converted into a tenant for life, and in exchange for giving up the outright interest he was about to inherit, he received a secured income of his own. The succession then rolled forward another generation, and the lock reset. There is something almost mechanical about how elegant that is. Any structure written once has a natural expiry, because sooner or later a holder arrives who is not bound by it. Rather than attempting to draft a document that never expires, which the courts would not have enforced anyway, the family built a document that renews itself, one generation at a time, by paying off the only person alive who could stop it. Look at what that transaction really is. At the precise moment a young man gains the legal power to break the family structure, he is offered money to sign the power away. Not taken from him, offered a trade. Guaranteed income now in exchange for the freedom he has held for a matter of months. And generation after generation, they took it. Because from inside a system like that, the trade looks obviously sensible. You are being offered certainty immediately in return for an abstraction you have never used. That is the quiet genius of it. The structure did not depend on every heir being disciplined or loyal or far-sighted. It only required that each one, once, on coming of age, prefer a comfortable income to a theoretical freedom. Almost everybody prefers the income. Now, if you have been listening carefully, you have already spotted the problem with all of this. A lock that perfect is a lock that will eventually trap someone who genuinely needs to get out. And here's a rule that holds everywhere, in every century, in every jurisdiction. Every lock creates an industry devoted to opening it. The better the lock, the better paid the industry. That is not cynicism about lawyers, it is arithmetic. Any restriction valuable enough to impose is by definition valuable enough to escape. The more thoroughly a thing binds, the more somebody will pay to be released from it. Unless in the 15th century, English lawyers built the key. It was called common recovery, and it is one of the strangest instruments in the history of property. Common recovery was an elaborate legal procedure that used collaborative lawsuits and legal fictions to bar a fee tail. To bar it means to strip the restrictions off, and to release the land into ordinary, sellable ownership. Read the description again and notice what is in it. Collaborative lawsuits, legal fictions. A collaborative lawsuit is a lawsuit where both sides are on the same side. The parties are not in dispute. They have agreed in advance what the outcome will be, and they are staging a proceeding in front of a court in order to obtain a judgment that changes the status of the land. The argument is theater, the judgment is real. And it worked because a court in that period was not principally asking whether the parties genuinely disagreed. It was asking whether the correct form had been observed. Observe the form, obtain the judgment, and that judgment carries exactly the same weight as one handed down after a real fight. The system was not being deceived so much as it was being operated. Take a full breath and appreciate what has happened here. In 1285, the state built an instrument to force families to keep their land. By the 1400s, the profession had built a ritual to undo it, and the court sat there and let the ritual work, because the ritual satisfied the form, even though everyone present understood the substance. And this went on for centuries. It was not a scandal, and it was not a loophole discovered by one clever man. It became ordinary conveyancing practice, taught and charged for, the standard method by which a bound estate got unbound when the family had decided it should be. Eventually, the law stopped pretending. The Fines and Recoveries Act of 1833 simplified the whole business by allowing a holder of property in tail to file what was called a disentailing assurance, freeing him from the conditions. A form, sign here. Now count the years. The instrument was fixed in 1285. The formal, honest, no theater method of undoing it arrived in 1833. That is more than 5 centuries during which the most binding structure in English property law could be escaped by anyone willing to pay a lawyer to perform a fictional argument. And this is where most people draw the wrong conclusion. They hear this and think the lock was a fraud, that the whole thing was decoration, and any family that wanted out simply got out. That is not what the record shows, and the reason is worth understanding, because it is the most transferable idea in this video. The lock did not work by being unbreakable. It worked by making the break a deliberate, expensive, public, documented act. Think about the difference. Under ordinary ownership, selling the estate is a decision. Under a settlement, selling the estate requires a proceeding, a professional, a fee, a record, and the knowledge of everyone involved. It moved the act out of the realm of things you can do in a bad month and into the realm of things you must plan, justify, and pay for. And the people it protects the family from are not, most of the time, villains. They are ordinary people having a bad year, with an obvious solution sitting in front of them and every reason in the world to take it. That is who these structures are actually aimed at, not the wastrel of the family legend, the reasonable man under pressure doing the reasonable thing. That is the actual function, not prevention, friction. A structure that makes the wrong decision slow, visible, and costly will outperform a rule that makes it forbidden, because the forbidden rule breaks completely the first time somebody is desperate enough. Friction bends and holds. Prohibition holds and then snaps. Every mechanism that follows in this video works on friction, not prohibition. Once you have that in your head, the modern versions stop looking like tax trivia and start looking like what they are. By the second half of the 1800s, the friction had become a genuine national problem. Because a lock that good has a cost that lands on everybody, not only on the family holding it. Settled land is land that cannot be bought, cannot be improved by a buyer, and cannot easily be borrowed against. Every acre inside a settlement is an acre the rest of the economy cannot reach, and the men in the great houses had titles, rents, and very little capacity to act. Brighton Parliament intervened with the Settled Land Act of 1882, which came into force at the beginning of 1883. And what Parliament did next is, to me, the single most instructive move in this entire history. It gave the tenant for life his powers back. He could now sell the land. He could exchange it. He could lease it. He could mortgage it within limits. If the story were simply about freeing land, it would end right there. It does not end there, because Parliament attached conditions, and the conditions are the whole point. First, when he sold, he was required to obtain the best price that could reasonably be obtained. Not a fair price, not an agreed price, the best price reasonably available, as a legal obligation. Second, and this is the one that should stop you, the money did not go to him. Capital money arising from a sale or a mortgage had to be paid to the trustees of the settlement, or into court, not into the pocket of the man who signed the contract. The family had always feared the conversion of the estate into spendable cash in the hands of one person remained impossible. What became possible was something quite different. The estate could now change shape. It could stop being this hillside and start being that fund, or that building, or that drainage scheme. What it could not do was stop being the family's. Read that arrangement one more time, because it is a masterpiece. He may sell, then he must hand the proceeds to somebody else. He has been given the power to convert the family's land into money and denied the power to hold the money. The lawyers had a name for the effect on the buyer's side: overreaching. The purchaser walks away with clean title, free of all the family's tangled interests, and those interests do not vanish. They lift off the land and settle onto the proceeds. Which means the lock was never removed. It was moved. The family structure stopped being attached to a hill and started being attached to a fund, and the same succession, the same beneficiaries, and the same restrictions carried on governing the fund. The asset became liquid. The control did not. There were further conditions, and each of them tells you something. He had to give written notice to the trustees before exercising the major powers, so that nothing significant could happen quietly. and he was required to have regard to the interests of all parties entitled under the settlement, including the ones not yet born. A man selling a field was under a legal duty to consider people who did not exist. That is not a figure of speech, and it is not sentiment. It is an enforceable obligation owed to future people, written into a statute of the 1880s, and it is one of the very few places anywhere in law where the unborn are handed a seat at a table where money is being moved. At the time, in an 1892 case, Lord Halsbury described the object of the legislation as being to release the land from the fetters of the settlement, and to render it a marketable article notwithstanding the settlement. Fetters, chains. That is the word the highest judicial officer in the country reached for, and he was not being poetic. He was being descriptive. The whole reform was argued as a liberation. The land was to be freed. The market was to be served. Nobody stood up in Parliament and announced that the purpose was to protect the families. Yet the machinery that came out the other end left every single family structure standing and merely changed the substance it was clamped around. And notice the shape of the reform. Parliament did not abolish the family structure. It kept the structure and changed what the structure attached to. This is the pattern you will now see everywhere. When a society decides that a wealth lock has become intolerable, it almost never destroys the lock. It converts it, because the families who built it are the same families sitting in the legislature, and because the underlying wish that a fortune should survive its holder is one that most societies quietly share. One more thing before we go on. If you are still here 20 minutes in, this channel was built for you. Subscribe and you will get the rest of how these families actually think. The English entail is now largely a historical object. Feetail was abolished as a legal estate in England by the Law of Property Act of 1925, though entails continued to exist behind the scenes as equitable interests, and no new feetail can be created at all following the Trusts of Land and Appointment of Trustees Act of 1996. Further, and did it in one line, Section 50 of the Abolition of Feudal Tenure Act, passed by the Scottish Parliament in 2000, reads as follows: land which, immediately before the appointed day, is held under an entail, is disentailed on that day. Homeless. One sentence. Centuries of structures released on a single calendar date, automatically, without anyone applying for anything. No hearing, no claim, thing it had taken lawyers 5 centuries to dismantle by ritual was ended by a legislature in a single subsection. So that is the end of the story. The locks are gone, the land is free, and the great families now hold their estates like anybody else holds a house. Except that in the very decades when the old locks were being dismantled, an entirely new one was being assembled, and it worked by doing the last thing you would expect. It would give the house away. The National Trust was founded in 1895, registered under the Companies Act, and given its first place to care for a few weeks later, 5 acres of clifftop at Dinas Oliw in Wales. In 1907, the National Trust was incorporated. The National Trust Act was drafted by Sir Robert Hunter, one of the founders. In the same year, the trust acquired Barrington Court, a 16th century country house in Somerset. That act carried a power that has no real equivalent in ordinary property law. The trust could declare its land inalienable. There's that word again, and here it is doing the heaviest work it has done anywhere in this story. Section 21 of that act gave the trust the power to declare land inalienable, and the effect is to prevent that land from being voluntarily sold or mortgaged by the trust itself. And it goes further than the trust's own hands. Under British law today, where a compulsory purchase order would take land the trust holds inalienably, and the trust objects and does not withdraw the objection, that order becomes subject to special parliamentary procedure. Think about the ceiling that puts on things. Not the owner, not a court, not a buyer with unlimited money, not a government department. An act of parliament or nothing. Now watch how the families used it. The 11th Marquess of Lothian, Philip Kerr, proposed that the trust should be able to accept the gift of country houses, along with endowments in land or capital, free of tax. Those powers went into the National Trust Act of 1937, and the arrangement that came out of it is one of the most elegant things in this entire subject. Under the country houses scheme, an owner could escape estate duty on the house and on the endowment needed to maintain it, while he and his heirs continued to live in the property, provided the public were allowed some access. Stop and take that apart, because at first hearing it does not sound possible. The family gives the house away. The family keeps living in the house. The family stops paying death duties on the house. And the act of giving it away is precisely what guarantees that no descendant of theirs will ever be able to sell it. The gift is the lock, and it is a lock that nobody can ever talk their way out of, because there is no longer anybody inside the family holding the thing that would have to be sold. Everything the entail did with a title, this does with a donation. It takes the power of sale out of the family permanently. It does so in a way the state actively rewards, and it leaves the family physically where they have always been. And the man who proposed it used it. In 1939, Lord Lothian bequeathed the trust his Jacobean house, Blickling, in Norfolk. Then the state joined in directly. In 1946, the National Land Fund was established by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Hugh Dalton, to secure culturally significant places for the nation as a memorial to those killed in the Second World War. Many great country houses were subsequently transferred to the trust with help from that fund, beginning with Coatheel in Cornwall, a memorial to the war dead, functioning as an estate preservation mechanism. Both things are completely true at once. The giving away route requires a family willing to part with legal ownership. Most are not. So the modern state built a second instrument for everybody else. And this one does not prohibit anything at all. It prices. It presidenti. There is a mechanism called conditional exemption. It applies to land of outstanding scenic, historic, or scientific interest, and to buildings of outstanding historic or architectural interest, together with their essential amenity land, as well as to works of art and collections of national importance. Exemption defers inheritance tax, but it is conditional, and the conditions are undertakings the owner gives to the tax authority. In the words of the Revenue's own manual, the owner must preserve the property, allow reasonable public access, and keep any works of art or other items in the United Kingdom. And then the sentence that does all the work. There is normally a tax charge if the undertakings are broken, or the property is sold or given away. Notice what is absent. Nobody has told this family they may not sell. There is no court, no title restriction, no named heir, no chain. There is simply a very large bill sitting behind the front door, waiting for the day somebody decides to leave. The entail rebuilt out of arithmetic instead of law, and it is arguably stronger because it never has to be enforced against anybody. It just sits there, being expensive, changing what the family wants. There is also a running cost, which is the part people forget. Reasonable public access is not a gesture. It means advertised open days, strangers walking through rooms your family has used for 2 centuries, and a maintenance standard you are legally bound to keep. The bargain has not changed since 1285. Duration is purchased with freedom. It has never once been available at any other price. And these bargains are not fixed. They get renegotiated, and there is a live example running right now. For years, agricultural property relief and business property relief allowed qualifying agricultural and business assets to be taken out of inheritance tax entirely, at 100%, with no ceiling on the amount. At the autumn budget of 2024, the government announced that from April 2026, the 100% relief would be capped, with 50% relief applying above the cap. The figure first announced was £1 million per estate. Then, on the 23rd of December 2025, the government announced the allowance would rise from £1 million to £2.5 million per estate. It became law in the Finance Act of 2026. Revenue estimated that around 1,100 estates would pay more tax under the change, of which 185 would include an agricultural claim. For scale, in the 2022 to 23 year, 1,730 estates claimed agricultural relief, and 3,840 claimed business relief. They should tell you something. This entire architecture, ancient and modern, has only ever concerned a very narrow band of holdings. It was never mass practice. It was always the machinery of a few thousand estates deciding to outlive their owners. The same instinct produced something with a different name and an identical spine. In the words of the American Revenue Service, Congress allowed an income tax deduction for owners of property who give up certain rights of ownership to preserve their land or buildings for future generations. Give up rights of ownership in exchange for a deduction, permanently. It's the detail I find most revealing in this entire video, because it is the moment a modern legislature quietly agreed with a medieval one. The original American rule accepted a restriction of not less than 30 years. In 1977, Congress amended the statute and replaced that wording. The new requirement was real property granted in perpetuity. 30 years was struck out. Forever was written in. Nobody was forced to do that. A legislature looked at a 30-year commitment, decided it was not a commitment at all, and raised the bar to permanent. The honest footnote is that the same instrument became a vehicle for large-scale abuse. The Revenue Service says syndicated conservation easement transactions have increasingly been used to generate inflated tax deductions that undermine the conservation incentives Congress intended to promote, and it formally designated those transactions as listed transactions. Any tool strong enough to bind land forever is strong enough to be worth faking. Which brings us to the mechanism itself. Everything so far has been a case. This is the engine underneath all of them. To see it, you have telling what the law was actually may bind its own descendants. And the answer is genuinely beautiful. Centuries, the outer limit on this kind of arrangement in the English-speaking world was a doctrine called the rule against perpetuities. It set a maximum. You could tie property up, but not forever. Here is how it measured that maximum. Property held in trust generally than 21 years after the death of a person who was alive when the trust was created. Read that again. The unit of measurement is not years. It is a human life. Not a term, not a century. A person, breathing, at the moment the document is signed, plus 21 years after they are gone. The law was saying something almost tender. You may reach past your own death. You may reach as far as the last person you could look in the eye, and one childhood beyond that. And then you must let go. There is a reason the doctrine was drawn that way, rather than as a flat number of years. A flat number is arbitrary, and an arbitrary number invites argument. A life is not arbitrary. A life is the natural boundary of a person's judgment, and the rule was in effect saying that your judgment may govern property for as long as it can still plausibly be called your judgment, and not one day further. Is the fence. Now watch what happened to it. When the American Congress built its tax on transfers that skip a generation, it did so on an assumption, stated at the time, that most states have a rule against perpetuities, which limits the duration of a trust. The federal rule was designed on the understanding that the state-level fence was standing. Since then, many states have eliminated their applicable rule against perpetuities, or substantially lengthened the duration a trust may run. The federal government did not remove the ceiling. The states removed it, underneath, one at a time, and the federal design was left resting on a floor that was no longer there. Two examples, both with their statutes cited in the record. South Dakota entirely abolished its rule against perpetuities. Nevada took a different route and adopted a longer fixed period instead, 365 years. Sit with that number for a second, because somebody chose it deliberately. 365 years is not forever. It is a specific, defensible, technical figure, and it comfortably exceeds any human life, any memory, any business, and almost any government currently in existence. It is a number designed to mean permanent, without ever having to say permanent. There is a particular lawyer's discipline in that choice. Saying forever invites a challenge on principle. Saying 365 invites a calculation, and the calculation comes out in the same place. The consequence is stated plainly by people who study it. The assets of perpetual dynasty trusts can grow indefinitely and benefit multiple successive generations with little to no federal gift, estate, or generation-skipping transfer tax consequences. So here is the mechanism, and here is the sentence this entire video exists to deliver. The variable these families optimize has never been the value of the asset. It has always been the duration of the control. Look back across 700 years with that in your hand, and the whole thing snaps into a single line. 1285 removes the power to sell. The strict settlement makes the holder a life tenant. 1882 lets him sell and takes the proceeds. Inalienable land needs an act of parliament to move. Conditional exemption makes leaving expensive. America strikes out 30 years and writes in perpetuity. South Dakota deletes the ceiling. Nevada writes 365. Polarization, every one of those is a different jurisdiction, a different century, and a different legal theory. Not one of them is about making the asset worth more. Every single one is about making the arrangement last longer. The travel. In this entire history, every time a society revisited the question of how long a family may bind its own property, the revision went one way: longer. The fence has been renegotiated repeatedly, and it has never once been moved in. Now, the counterexample, because a mechanism you cannot see failing is a mechanism you have not understood. In 1880, William Henry Vanderbilt engaged the architects John B. Snook and Charles B. Atwood to design and furnish a house on Fifth Avenue in New York. It was completed in 1882. The work ultimately cost $2 million, about 2/3 of which went on the interior alone. One house. It was 3 residences in 2 sections. The southern portion, at 640 Fifth Avenue, for William Henry, his wife Maria, and their youngest son George. The northern section held 2 more units, one for his daughter Emily and her husband, and one on West 52nd Street for his daughter Margaret and hers. Hear the flaw in the design. It was built already divided. 3 households, separate addresses, separate titles. Each branch holding its own piece, and each branch able to sell its own piece. They did. Emily sold the northern residence in January of 1926, and demolition of the northern part began in 1927. Demolition of the southern section began in September 1947, and the house had been entirely razed by March of 1949. Nothing of the original structure survives. Commercial buildings stand on the ground. Of the richest families in America, built one of the most expensive private houses in the country, and it did not reach its 70th birthday. Meanwhile, the instruments we have been describing were designed for exactly the opposite outcome, and they are the reason the phrase, the family seat, still means something in one country and means nothing at all in the other. The difference was not money. There was no shortage of money. The difference was that one of those arrangements removed the power of sale from the individual, and the other one handed it out 3 times on the day the house was finished. And now the honest part, because there's a version of this subject that is pure romance, and you deserve better than that. Old money does not always hold. The idea that these families never sell is simply false, and the same name proves it. The Breakers in Newport was built between 1893 and 1895 for Cornelius Vanderbilt II. By 1948, the family announced that the high-maintenance property would be leased to a preservation society for $1 a year. $1. The house had not become worthless, it had become a liability, which is a different and much more common way for great property to end. 72, the society bought it outright for $365,000, with a condition attached. The Countess, who had grown up there, was granted a life tenancy of her mother's private apartment on the 3rd floor. After her death in 1998, the society agreed that the family could remain on that floor. And then, the ending, no romantic version of this story would include. In 2015, the family publicly opposed the society's plans for the grounds. In 2018, they moved out. In 2024, the third floor was opened to public tours. The house survived. The family's place inside it did not. That is the difference between preserving an object and preserving a position, and it is worth being clear-eyed about which one each of these mechanisms actually delivers. So, what does any of this mean for the way you handle your own affairs? Not the instruments. You are not going to entail a farm, and nothing here is a recommendation about your money. What transfers is the question underneath it. While ask yourself what you own that a single person in a single bad season could convert into cash, because that is not a list of your assets. That is a list of your exposures. Every family here answered that question, then went to enormous, expensive, uncomfortable lengths to shorten the list, and ask the harder one. What are you willing to give up permanently so that something outlasts you? They gave up liquidity. They gave up privacy. They gave up the right to change their minds. They paid in freedom every time, and they paid it in advance. Rule about land, and nobody explains it, because it does not sound like wealth. It sounds like a burden that happens to appreciate. If this changed how you look at an old house, subscribe. This is the whole business of this channel. Next, I want to show you the other half of this system, because a structure like this is worthless without somebody fit to receive it, and these families were far more ruthless about choosing that person than they ever were about choosing an asset. God bless you.